Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. Before he died, Thomas lied out of resentment and claimed that he had hidden a box of tiny goldfish in our old house. Our children dug 3 feet into the ground, searching for that so-called inheritance. In the end, suspicion grew among them until they stopped speaking to one another and cut ties completely. When I visited his grave the following year, I heard his lifelong white moonlight, Evelyn Tate, standing in front of his tombstone with her grandson. She spoke with great satisfaction, saying, "Thomas, thank goodness you left all your inheritance to me. Our son just built a luxury house in the city, and our grandson is about to go abroad. As for Lisa and those worthless brats she gave birth to, they've been fighting among themselves for ages while searching for that box of tiny goldfish. Lisa practically aged 20 years overnight. Haha, Thomas, you were always the clever one. She wouldn't let us be together when you were alive. And now, even after your death, you still won't let her or her children live in peace." After saying that, she even brushed her hand across the tombstone. "In this life I can't put my name on your headstone. In the next life we will be together forever." Nearly coughed up blood. My head buzzed endlessly. Thomas, so dignified and proper in front of everyone, had actually fathered an illegitimate child with Evelyn Tate. His whole life he cared most about his reputation. No wonder he hid their affair so flawlessly. And I only learned the truth after he died, standing right here at his grave. He gave all his love and inheritance to his white moonlight and her descendants, while the hatred and lies he left behind were dumped on me and my children. It's one thing to kill someone, but must he stab my heart too? What right did Thomas have to dwell in my heart? I wandered back to the old house in a daze. Looking at the traces of the life I had spent there, everything felt meaningless. I typed out everything that happened today and sent it to each of my children. Don't ask why I didn't send it in the family group chat. My family had already shattered the moment Thomas told that lie. After sending everything, exhaustion washed over me. The moment my head hit the pillow, I fell asleep. When noise woke me, I found myself looking at a scene all too familiar. White mourning banners swaying, people in funeral linen, and waves of sorrowful cries echoing harshly through the hall. It was a funeral hall, but the photo on the altar was mine. I figured I must be dead. Returning on the 7th day after death just to take one last look at the children and grandchildren I cared about. My oldest son and his wife worked in government. When Thomas died, they insisted on giving him a grand funeral. Now my own funeral was more than twice as extravagant. My second son and his wife, who were always calculating in business, were crying uncontrollably. From their words I finally understood. The moment they received my message, they rushed to the old house and found my cold body. My youngest daughter, long since divorced, stood in the center of the hall with the granddaughter I had raised myself. She was furious and heartbroken. "I can't let my mom go like this. That old man never did a decent thing in his whole life. Even after death, he's still tearing us siblings apart." My second son gritted his teeth. "I'm going to the bank. A transfer that big can't be untraceable. Then we'll get a lawyer. We're taking that inheritance back." My second daughter-in-law said, "What if it was all cash or some voluntary gift agreement? That lawsuit won't be easy to win." My second son replied, "If the legal way doesn't work, I'll handle them privately." "Big brother, what do you think?" My oldest son and his wife exchanged a firm look. "Do it, Thomas. Did you see that? My children aren't anything like what you imagined. You thought a fabricated inheritance could tear this family apart. Keep dreaming. It's a pity, though. If I had known the truth earlier, if I had taken my children and left Thomas back then, maybe we wouldn't have had to suffer all those years." When I opened my eyes again, I was lying in my bed, waking slowly. My head felt heavy, my mouth dry with hunger and thirst, and I was weak all over. My children crowded around me like frightened kittens, whispering, "Mom, Mom." As soon as my eyelids fluttered open, I saw my 3 children once again, small like tiny bean sprouts. Jacob, Ethan, and Mia. The moment Jacob, the oldest, saw me wake up, he let out a breath of relief. "Mom, you've been out cold for a whole day and night. Dad never came back either." "Mom, did Dad stop wanting us?" I rubbed the strange swollen bump on my forehead, unable to remember anything that happened before I passed out. The 2 younger ones burst into loud, messy sobs while Jacob, at least able to speak clearly, sniffled and cried as he told me everything that happened before I fainted. The previous evening, Thomas came home acting like a completely different person. He tore the house apart, rummaged through every drawer, stuffed the bank and ration tickets into his pockets, and tried to run off with them. When I walked in and saw it, I naturally wouldn't allow it. We argued. Then Thomas said even more bizarre things, claiming I had ruined his entire life, that being able to start over was heaven's blessing, and he absolutely wouldn't let himself make the same mistake again. He even said that as for the children, I could deal with them myself. When the kids came over to intervene, Thomas grew annoyed and kicked Ethan and Mia aside. Heartbroken, I rushed toward them, but Thomas shoved me hard, and my head slammed into the doorframe, causing me to collapse unconscious. He didn't even try to save me. He grabbed anything of value in the house and ran. Jacob managed to take care of his younger siblings, but he couldn't catch his own father. For a whole day and night, Jacob and the two little ones dragged and pushed me onto the bed and stayed beside me, praying desperately for heaven to wake me up. After hearing everything, I frowned tightly. Thomas had always cared more about his pride than anyone. When had he ever caused such a scene unless, like me, he also brought memories from a previous life back with him and somehow returned to the 1980s after death? At this moment, my 7-year-old Jacob whimpered at my bedside. "Mom, Dad really doesn't want us anymore." Ethan was 5 and Mia was only 3. I grabbed the two little ones by the hands and shot Jacob a stern glare to silence him. Right then Mia's stomach rumbled loudly. "Mom, I'm hungry." Poor children. They had gone hungry for an entire day and night. I lit the stove and cooked 3 simple bowls of plain noodles. The two younger ones slurped theirs down hungrily, while Jacob sobbed so hard he couldn't eat. "Mom, if I had held on to Dad's leg tighter, would he not have left us?" My head throbbed painfully. His legs are on his own body. If he didn't run today, would he not run tomorrow? Jacob pouted in frustration. I continued. "Your dad has been gone a whole day and night. If something happened to me, would the 3 of you starve to death or cry yourselves to death? And none of you even thought to go outside and ask for help." Jacob burst into tears again. "But Dad said family shame shouldn't be shared outside." I almost fainted from anger. In our previous life, the Thomas family had been landlords. Before the liberation, they owned half the county, and his precious white moonlight, Evelyn Tate, came from an even more prominent background. Her family worked in government, and she even had a relative stationed as a military officer on an island province. In those years, because of their bad class background, both of them struggled constantly in work and daily life. To have a better chance at surviving, Thomas had no choice but to break up with Evelyn Tate and marry me, the daughter of 3 generations of poor farmers. After marriage, Thomas always looked down on me. He thought I lacked refinement, had no manners and no class. My family was poor, yes, but I was still an educated junior high graduate. I didn't want to be looked down upon forever. So, I studied hard and got into a vocational school. But Thomas always said that in his family, even if their women had no diploma, even with all the genuine knowledge and learning I carried within me, I still couldn't outmatch Thomas in arguments. I knew studying wasn't something I could compete with him on. So, I shifted my focus to daily life and work instead. After we got married, we had 3 children, and our days were calm and uneventful, peaceful, even joyful at times. But Thomas always liked to sigh dramatically for no reason, saying things like how even if a couple treated each other with utmost respect, there would still be unresolved regrets. With my level of education, I truly couldn't understand what nonsense he was complaining about all day. To be honest, I also wished life could feel poetic. But the weight of reality, the chores, the farm work, the endless responsibilities, and raising the children meant that the moment I opened the door each morning, all I saw was the grind of rice, oil, firewood, and salt. How could I have the luxury to study poetry or literature? But deep down, I felt that it was this error that trapped Thomas's spirit and talent, leaving him frustrated and unfulfilled for most of his life. Without us even realizing it, the children and I constantly shaped our lives around his thoughts and wishes. Our whole household silently followed anything Thomas said. Yet, in the end, wasn't it just that all of us had been mentally crushed by him for so long that we became used to obeying? Otherwise, how could one sentence, "Family shame shouldn't be shared outside," scare poor Jacob so badly he didn't dare run out to ask for help? I slammed my hand on the table in anger. Family shame shouldn't be shared. I'll show him what it means to share. I'll make sure his name becomes famous across the whole town. Then I looked at the 3 small, frightened, pitiful children sitting before me. Maybe heaven really had heard the wish I made at my own funeral, and that's why I was brought back to this moment to save myself and my children with my own hands. The next day, I sent 2 of the children to the neighbor's house. The neighbor lady leaned close and whispered mysteriously, "Honestly, I heard your family arguing the other night. The children were crying too. I knocked on your door, but your oldest just opened it a crack and said you were only sleeping and that his little brother and sister were fine. Lisa, are you and Thomas really okay?" As she said this, Jacob stood beside me with his head lowered. Suddenly, a habit in our home flashed through my mind. Because the Thomas family had landlord status before, they'd always kept to themselves in the village. Even with the closest relatives and friends, they never liked interacting much. After I married Thomas, I followed their rules. Even during the day, no matter who came to visit, the door was never fully opened. We only left a narrow gap to speak through and then quickly locked it again. It took me 2 lifetimes to finally understand just how narrow and suffocating a world Thomas had forced upon me and the children. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. So I told the neighbor everything. How Thomas had run away with all the money and ration tickets and how he had beaten me and the children. The neighbor lady was stunned. Has Thomas lost his mind? He always acted so gentle and refined. How could he do something like this? I showed her the injuries on Ethan's and Mia's stomachs. The 2 little ones winced, tears welling at the corners of their eyes, but they tried hard not to cry. Seeing this, the neighbor lady began scolding Thomas nonstop. Meanwhile, Jacob hung his head and blamed himself. "Mom, it's all my fault. I didn't take good care of them. I held back my frustration. Are you the one who hit them? Why do you take every mistake onto yourself? If you want to protect your brother and sister, then what will you do from now on?" Jacob didn't answer. Ethan snorted. "Whoever hits me, I'll hit them back." Little Mia chimed in with her baby voice. "Daddy bad. Daddy hit." I gathered the 2 younger ones into my arms. After all, only the one who takes a kick to the stomach truly knows the pain. Then I turned to Jacob. "Didn't you say you wanted to find your dad? Fine. I'll take you into town today to look for him." Jacob's eyes lit up instantly. Jacob's eyes were filled with hope. In his mind, Thomas was still that knowledgeable, cultured father he idolized. Some things, until he saw them with his own eyes, he wouldn't be able to let go of his illusions. The neighbor lady pulled Ethan and Mia into her arms and said righteously, "Lisa, you can't just let him get away with this. At the very least, you must take back the money. I'll watch the 2 kids for you. And if Thomas comes back to the village early, I'll have my husband block him for you." I thanked her and took Jacob with me to catch the bus into town. On the way, Jacob's inferiority crept in again. "Mom, everyone knows what Dad did. What if people look down on us from now on?" I said firmly, "We're not the ones who did anything wrong. If anyone should be ashamed, it won't be us." Seeing he was still gloomy, I continued, "When kids do something wrong, they need to be punished. Your dad is a grown man, an educated intellectual, someone who understands more principles than you. Shouldn't he be punished even more?" Jacob looked thoughtful as we entered the city. I brought him to the faculty housing area of a certain middle school. From behind the small fence surrounding the ground floor courtyard of one of the units, we could see Thomas, refreshed and spirited, standing shoulder to shoulder with a beautiful woman in a dress, Evelyn Tate. Beside them stood a boy around 6 or 7. The 3 of them were gathered around a garden table, eating snacks and having a warm, cozy afternoon tea. The little boy turned his head while laughing, revealing a face that resembled Jacob by at least 70 or 80%. That child was Thomas and Evelyn Tate's illegitimate son, Tony. My brow twitched violently. Jacob stared in shock and disbelief, clenching his tiny fists over his mouth to keep himself from crying out. We hadn't watched for long before the boy ran back into the house. Thomas's eyes were full of gentle affection, and Evelyn was glowing with a flirtatious smile. The 2 of them linked arms, looking just like a deeply affectionate married couple. Evelyn asked, "Why did you come so early? And why did you buy so many things and that piano? What am I supposed to tell the old man when he returns?" Thomas said solemnly, "Tell him what? Tony is my son. I'm never going back to that countryside home again. Don't worry. I've been reborn. For the next few decades, I'll give you and Tony the best life possible." With that, Thomas walked into the house arm in arm with Evelyn. Soon, the sound of a pleasant piano melody drifted out, along with bursts of joyful laughter from their happy little family of 3. Back when Thomas was young, he used to donate 2/3 of his salary to struggling coworkers and poor students trying to stay in school, earning him a reputation for being charitable and kind-hearted. Our entire household expenses relied on the work points I earned and the remaining 1/3 of his salary. We lived extremely frugally, but I never knew Thomas had been giving the money to a woman in the city, his lover, and to their illegitimate son. "Mom, why is Dad with them? Who are they?" Jacob tugged at my hand, pulling me back to my senses. My palm grew cold. "They're the woman your father likes and the child he had with her." The moment I said the truth out loud, the expression on my 7-year-old son's face looked as though his entire world had collapsed. The great, responsible, well-educated father he had imagined died completely in his heart that instant. He finally understood. It wasn't that Thomas didn't want him anymore. It was that Thomas had never cherished him in the first place. I held Jacob's hand as we walked out of the housing complex, tears streaming down my face. Several tenants passing by probably noticed us. A warm-hearted woman carrying a basket of groceries stopped us. "Are you looking for someone, or did something happen? You're both crying so hard." Jacob forgot all about keeping family shame inside. "Ma'am, my dad doesn't want us anymore." I pretended to look extremely embarrassed. Holding back a painful sob, I forced myself to say a few more sentences. "My husband has no shame. He ran off with all our money, told me not to hold him back, said I could deal with the kids myself, and then came to the city to fool around with another woman. Folks from our village said they saw him come here, so the kids and I chased after him. But when we arrived, we found out he'd already had a child with another woman." As I spoke, a few neighbors who had been eavesdropping slowly gathered around us. The woman with the grocery basket looked utterly shocked, though she tried not to stare at Jacob's tear-streaked little face. Still, she couldn't help whispering, "The resemblance, it's too much." The surrounding residents exchanged meaningful looks. At that moment, I tugged Jacob along to leave. The woman called after us, "Hey girl, where are you two going?" I answered without hesitation, "I'm going to his workplace to report him. The child he had with that woman is about the same age as my oldest son. He hid it from me all these years. One family in the city, another family in the countryside. Does he think he's some landlord who can keep women in both arms?" Instantly, the woman and the neighbors around her looked as if they'd suddenly figured everything out. They didn't try to stop us anymore. I knew that once we stepped out of that teacher housing compound, public opinion would sweep over Thomas, Evelyn Tate, and that illegitimate son like a flood beast, tearing them apart until nothing remained. After all, Evelyn Tate also had a husband, the well-known retired principal who lived in that same housing compound. In my previous life, I had always known of Evelyn Tate, not just because she was famous for her beauty in the neighboring village, but because she had done something outrageous in the 1980s. When the wave of rural migration to the cities began, Evelyn, who came from a country background, was introduced to an elderly retired teacher couple and hired as a live-in maid. Not long after, the old lady suddenly died of a heart attack. Only a few months after his wife's death, the old man married Evelyn, the maid who had been living under the same roof. The old man's grown children couldn't stand it. They returned home, cut ties with their father, and stormed out. But the old man, defying everyone, insisted on staying with Evelyn. Less than half a year after the wedding, Evelyn went to the hospital and gave birth to a healthy baby boy. It caused a huge uproar at the time. Even back in the countryside, I heard countless people gossiping. I remember going home and repeating the news to Thomas like it was something fascinating. His face immediately turned dark. He scolded me, saying, "You're foolish enough most days. Now you're learning to spread baseless rumors too." Then he humiliated me thoroughly, criticizing me in front of the children and making me look completely worthless. But what was the truth? Evelyn Tate and Thomas had been involved long before that. Evelyn used that old teacher, ruined his family just so she could raise Thomas's child. Thomas had done it, yet didn't dare admit it and wouldn't allow me to say a single bad word about the woman he loved. The two of them were truly a perfect pair of shameless people. Fortunately, I still had a relative I could rely on in the city, my cousin Carl Grant. In the early 1980s, when the winds of economic reform swept across the country, Carl came into the city to start a business. Within a few years, he made a fortune and brought his wife and kids to the city to enjoy a better life. Everyone in the village envied him. But whenever I mentioned him at home, Thomas would immediately lash out, calling Carl a newly rich peasant with a big gold chain, a big gold watch, and probably only one step away from getting gold teeth. He sneered. You envy that stench of copper and greed? So I stopped bringing it up. But now, when Jacob and I showed up at Carl's restaurant, he froze for a moment. Then, after noticing the tear stains on our faces, he rushed over and asked anxiously, Lisa, what happened? Who bullied you? I briefly explained what had happened. Carl's wife, who had previously looked a bit impatient when she saw us walk in, suddenly planted her hands on her hips and stomped her foot on the ground. Carl's wife immediately started cursing Thomas. He barely makes any money in a whole month, and yet he managed to set up a home in the city. He even bought a piano. No wonder he ran off with all the money. You mean he was supporting another woman and another child? And Lisa and your 3 kids were suffering in the countryside like that. Her scolding hit right at the heart of it. Jacob's expression darkened further. Thomas always valued him the most, saying he was the eldest son of the family, that he would one day carry the family's responsibilities, study hard, and restore the scholarly reputation of the Tang family. And what happened instead? Thomas's other illegitimate son lived in a bright, spacious single-family courtyard home in the city with a piano inside, playing music in his free time, enjoying afternoon tea with cookies. Meanwhile, Jacob and his brother squeezed together on a squeaky old wooden bed, playing with mud when they got bored. Only by studying desperately and scoring double hundreds on exams could he earn a single peach cookie. The difference between their lives was like heaven and earth. Jacob suddenly burst into tears. Mom, did Dad never like me at all? Did he only like me because I look like that boy? For a moment I couldn't speak. Even Carl and his wife didn't dare say anything. It sounded ridiculous. Yet, when you thought deeper, it wasn't impossible. My face darkened like a lump of coal. I grabbed Jacob's hand. Don't be sad. It's not that your father doesn't want us. It's that we don't want him anymore. The next day, I left Jacob in Carl's wife's care and took Carl along with a few of his restaurant workers to the teacher housing complex. When we arrived, it was Tony who opened the door. In a crisp little voice he asked, Who are you looking for? Carl answered bluntly, Your dad. The boy tilted his head. Are you looking for my old dad or my young handsome dad? I gave a cold laugh. Then how many dads do you have? Or should I ask which dad do you like more? Tony giggled innocently. I like the young handsome one. Tony, who are you talking to? A gentle female voice called from inside, tinged with suspicion. Tony, too young and untouched by the world, immediately pushed the courtyard door wide open. And there she was, Evelyn Tate, dressed neatly, glowing and polished. She also saw me, roughened by years of labor. Tony, ever oblivious, added loudly, So which dad did you all come looking for? Evelyn went pale with fright. She rushed forward and scooped the boy into her arms. Evelyn, Tony, what are you two doing? And just like that, Thomas appeared, fresh-faced and lively. Carl didn't waste a single word. He stepped forward and flipped Thomas over his shoulder, slamming him straight onto the ground. His restaurant workers rushed into the courtyard and began smashing the carefully arranged little garden. Flower pots shattered everywhere. Evelyn clutched Tony tightly, trembling like a leaf in the autumn wind. I walked straight up and slapped her hard. She was so stunned that she didn't dodge. The slap landed squarely across her cheek. Tony screamed, You're bad people. Why are you hitting my mom and dad? I stared at his face. So young, so innocent, so painfully similar to my eldest son's. Evelyn held Tony protectively, then, as if mustering courage, snapped, You've hit me. You vented your anger. Fine, take your people and leave. If I shout for help, none of you will get away with this. I slapped her again, this time on the other cheek. Where is my money? The ration tickets. You married into the city and latched on to an old man to help you raise your child. How dare you still take money from Thomas? All year long he claimed he was donating his salary to struggling coworkers and poor students. I caught him today. So tell me, did Thomas not spend a single cent on you and your child? I asked coldly. On the other side of the courtyard, Thomas was already being thoroughly beaten by Carl. His front tooth looked chipped and half his face was swollen, so badly that he whistled air through his teeth when he talked. How did you even find this place? Before he finished, Carl landed 2 more blows. You bastard! You took all the money and ration tickets from home just to support another woman. And you still dare ask how we tracked you down? Then Carl shouted at Evelyn, give the money back. Return everything. A few residents who had been crouching outside the courtyard, eavesdropping, completely forgot they were supposed to be hiding. They began openly discussing what they heard. I was wondering how she dared show off so openly, one muttered. Turns out she brought her lover into the house. And besides mooching off the old man, she still expects her lover to spend money on her. The old principal really brought this on himself, another said, losing his wife and then marrying the young maid under the same roof. Who knows what actually happened back then? I intentionally let a mocking expression slip across my face, letting everyone see that their scandal was now public knowledge. Under the barrage of whispers, Evelyn Tate finally snapped. Face flushed with humiliation and fury, she grabbed a small clay flower pot from behind her and smashed it onto my head before I could react. The smell of dirt and plant roots filled my nose as I staggered backward. Carl rushed to support me. Even Thomas, who was sprawled on the ground, gasped. Evelyn. That was enough to jolt her back to reality. Dozens of eyes had witnessed her striking me, including her own child. Tony's lips trembled. Mom! Evelyn pulled him back quickly, wanting to retreat into the house, but Carl's workers blocked the way. She panicked, scooped Tony into her arms, and bolted toward the main gate, only to be stopped dead by an imposing elderly man standing there with a bulging travel bag. His face froze in shock, tears streaming down his face. Tony ran to him. Old Dad, please help Mom and my young dad. The old man's entire face flushed crimson with rage, his body shaking uncontrollably. A few neighbors hurried to steady him. Otherwise, he would have collapsed on the spot. Tony kept sobbing. Old Dad! Old Dad! A neighbor finally shoved the child aside. Get out of the way. Tony fell hard onto his backside and wailed even louder. In the 1980s, a wife bringing her maternal family to confront her husband for cheating was a common enough scene. But because my head had been split open by that flower pot, I wasn't held responsible at all. Instead, I became the victim and a key witness. At the police station, Carl exaggerated everything we had endured by at least tenfold. Officer, you didn't see it. Even with several grown men there, my sister was knocked unconscious by a flower pot. Can you imagine how arrogant and brazen this adulterous pair must be? Thomas, bruised and swollen beyond recognition, clutched his head in frustration. His pride, his reputation, his job, his entire future gone. All gone. When the police came to take him away, he suddenly panicked. I want to see my wife. Carl nearly punched him again. Your wife, you shameless bastard. You beat her when you stole the money, didn't you? She was unconscious at home for a whole day and night. And this time your lover smacked her straight into the hospital. Whether she wakes up or not is still unknown. If she doesn't survive, then both of you are murderers. Thomas froze as though struck by lightning. His knees buckled and he collapsed in front of Carl. Carl had no patience left. He kicked Thomas square in the chest. Now you kneel. Kneel my ass. A police officer tugged Carl back symbolically, but Carl still managed to land a few more punches. I stayed in the hospital pretending to be unconscious for several days. Jacob learned from Carl that Thomas and Evelyn Tate were the ones who beat me until I ended up like this. Jacob was caught between fear and hatred. Mom, just please wake up. Mom, don't leave me. He kept murmuring while I pretended to be unconscious. During those days, he wiped my face and hands, sat on a little stool beside my bed, and read stories to me. There were moments when I nearly broke character, but I had to hold strong because in our previous life, Thomas had influenced Jacob far too deeply. Back in the village, among a group of simple farmers, Thomas carried the air of a fallen noble, aloof, proud, and unbearably arrogant. In those impoverished years, people had little knowledge and even less imagination. Naturally, they were easily impressed by anything they'd never seen before, and Thomas's way of speaking often captivated them. In our past life, Jacob always respected his father deeply. Where Thomas applied for college, what major he chose, even what kind of woman he married, these were all influenced by Thomas's guidance. At every crossroads in his life, it was his father's opinions that shaped the direction he took. I was afraid that once Thomas and I divorced, time might wash everything clean and someday Jacob would forgive Thomas. But I had already died once. I couldn't afford to gamble another lifetime. So after letting Jacob spend a few days living like a child without a mother, like a weed growing in harsh wind, I finally woke up. Carl and his wife rushed to the hospital when they heard, bringing Jacob along. He threw his arms around me, crying tears of relief as though he'd regained something precious he had lost. I hugged him tightly. Whatever the world became, however people changed, how could I ever stop loving my own children? When the doctor came to examine me, I overheard Carl and his wife whispering in the hallway. That's how I learned that Thomas and Evelyn Tate had already been thrown into detention. The child was obviously Thomas's. The old principal, Evelyn's husband, had completely lost face. Naturally, he couldn't keep raising the boy. But once the child started calling him old dad, over and over at the hospital bedside, the old man seemed to soften. And since, as people say, there are no unfilial children around a sick bed, he eventually kept Tony and hired a caregiver to look after him. Carl snorted with disgust. Who would have imagined? That old fool still wants to raise Thomas's kid. Carl's wife let out a cold laugh. Intellectuals, ha! Old or young, men only care about the same kind of flesh. Her words tugged at an old memory. My encounter with Evelyn Tate at Thomas's grave in my past life. I was old then, wearing rough, cheap clothes, my face covered in wrinkles. Evelyn, on the other hand, wore designer brands from head to toe. Even her hair seemed expensive. Why? Because she and her child had spent their entire lives enjoying the inheritance of that old principal, and later the marital assets that belonged to Thomas and me. That illegitimate son had been a beneficiary of everything. Our suffering paid for his comfort. Now that I was reborn, why should I let him continue to grow up comfortably? Why leave him the chance to become the man who would one day hurt me and my children? So I gathered photos of Thomas and Jacob along with a photo of Tony, wrote a letter, and mailed them all together to the old principal's adult children living out of town. A few days later, while walking with Jacob on the hospital lawn, we heard loud shouting from a hospital room in a nearby building. It wasn't high up, so we could see everything clearly. A middle-aged woman wearing thick glasses was screaming hysterically at the old principal. How exactly did my mother die? Wasn't it you and that maid who killed her? I used to think you were just senile. But now I see you were heartless. Your wife died under suspicious circumstances. And you never investigated anything. Yet you have the nerve to raise another man's bastard child. What followed was the sound of breaking glass. A child crying, people trying to intervene, chaos everywhere. Jacob stayed close at my side. Mom, don't be scared. I'm here. I patted his head. Mom isn't scared anymore. There's nothing left for me to fear. From now on, the only ones who will suffer are Thomas and his little family. At that moment, the old principal's adult children were trying to drag Tony out of the hospital room. Tony had been pampered and spoiled by Evelyn Tate since he was little. Inside the hospital room, he threw himself on the floor, rolling and kicking. I'm not leaving. I want old dad to chase all of you out. The old principal's eldest daughter dragged the boy forward and shoved him toward the hospital bed where the old principal lay. Old dad, young dad, which one is it? You shameless little brat? She shouted. The old principal, desperate to protect himself, had no choice but to shut his eyes and pretend he saw nothing. After that, they had someone take the boy back to Evelyn's family home in the countryside. According to the law at the time, Thomas and Evelyn were charged with hooliganism, already a serious crime, and on top of that with intentional injury. Evelyn's sentence should have been heavier than Thomas's. But when the old principal's children later learned that he had actually been asking people to secretly take care of Evelyn while she was in the holding cell, they exploded with fury and went straight to the police to reopen an investigation. They insisted their mother, Mrs. Gang, might have been murdered. The case was dug up again. All of Evelyn's past misappropriations of their family property were dragged into light. The commotion was enormous. But after endless back-and-forth investigations, the final conclusion was this: Mrs. Gang had indeed died accidentally. However, during her final moments when she was struggling, the old principal had gone into Evelyn's room back when she was still a young maid and was teaching her foreign languages under the blanket. Because of that, he missed the best window to save his wife. When the truth came out, the old principal couldn't withstand the constant judgment and disgust from everyone around him. One dark, windy night, he left his hospital bed and chose to fly freely from the hospital building. His children handled his funeral in a hurry, then went to Evelyn's village to settle the score. The biggest and newest farmhouse in the entire area, the wide courtyard and all, belonged to Evelyn's family. But the Chin family refused to admit they had ever taken the old principal's money. Evelyn's mother even lifted her chin proudly and said to the crowd, "The old principal was my son-in-law. You, Junior, still owe me a proper greeting." Seeing she was such a shameless old crone, the old principal's children secretly hired a group of street toughs. When the Chin family was out, they smashed through several of the new house's walls, including load-bearing ones, leaving gaping holes everywhere. When the Chin family saw their once grand home now leaking wind from all four sides, they cursed the heavens and threatened revenge. But the old principal's children had already returned to their own cities. There was no way to chase them down. While the old principal's children were settling scores with Evelyn Tate's family, I finally divorced Thomas, who was still in jail. He probably wouldn't get out until the hooliganism charge was abolished. He kept asking to see me. He wanted to confirm one thing. Why had his reborn life turned into such a disaster before he even had a chance to enjoy anything? Why? Besides heaven giving me a second life, wasn't the answer simple? He was too greedy. He believed he had endured a lifetime of humiliation. And the moment he regained his youth, he immediately ran off with all the family money and beat me to the ground. Once in the city, he didn't even bother hiding. He openly moved into the old principal's home. Did he think karma was hard to attract? But I knew what he was really panicked about. Another matter entirely. Those tiny goldfish he had hidden in the wall bricks of the chicken coop. I should have realized it earlier. A man as proud as Thomas, who always considered himself too refined for housework, had personally built that intricate chicken coop before our wedding, and he tended to the chickens every single day. After Jacob was born, he went there every morning to fetch eggs for nourishment. I used to think even if he didn't care for me, at least he sincerely cared for the children. But everything he did, all of it had been for his own hidden schemes. Trouble hidden inside the household. Disaster raised under our own roof. Thomas had never been a decent human being from the beginning. Fortunately, in this lifetime, I was the one who sent both Thomas and Evelyn Tate to jail myself. From now on, with that little box of goldfish in hand and my 3 children with me, life was nothing short of delightful. But one day when I pushed open my front door, I saw Evelyn Tate's furious mother standing there with Tony, the illegitimate child, looking miserable and dirty, blocking my doorway like a curse. She had come begging right to my home. Mrs. Chin shoved the shabby, ragged, dust-covered boy toward me. "Tony is my daughter's child. Thomas's child. You're Thomas's wife. You deal with him." After saying that, she tried to leave, but I grabbed her like you'd grab a stray dog. "What? What nonsense are you spouting in broad daylight? Any child on the street, you can just claim he belongs to Thomas and I'm supposed to raise him? Why don't you say you're my child? Should I raise you too?" The neighbor lady across from me opened her door, met my eyes and immediately hollered, "Everyone come look. Evelyn Tate's mother is here." Within seconds, all the village aunties came trotting over, energized and ready for battle. "So this is the mother of that shameless woman arrested for hooliganism. Well, this is something to see. Your daughter chases after any married man, young or old. Everyone knows her reputation, and you still dare show your face here. Your daughter got arrested, and now you want to humiliate us right at our own doorstep. Your daughter is shameless, but you as her mother are even worse." Spit flew everywhere, but Mrs. Chin wasn't rattled at all. She spit back. "Tony is Thomas's, all right. According to the old rules, any child a man fathered outside should be brought home for the legal wife to raise. Nothing wrong with that." I snapped right back. "I've seen shamelessness, but you Chin people really haven't been reformed enough, have you?" No wonder Evelyn could throw herself at her employer, and learn foreign languages under the blanket. You've got a black heart. You took the old principal's money to build that new house. And now you won't even raise your own grandson. Mrs. Chin's face flickered with guilt only for a second before she puffed up again and barked. You couldn't keep your man, useless woman. Anyway, the child is Thomas's. Sending him back to your Tang family is only natural. Inside the house, Jacob heard the commotion. He rushed out and held up my newly issued divorce certificate for everyone to see. You old witch, he shouted. Don't you dare bully my mom. It's not that my dad abandoned us. We abandoned him together with Mom. I took the divorce certificate and showed it around as well. Mrs. Chin froze in shock, and even the village aunties looked stunned. In the 1980s, divorce was something that shattered people's understanding of the world. But I had long prepared my explanation. My in-laws have both passed away. Over the years, Thomas received so much help from the villagers who never held grudges against him. But he always believed his ancestors were prestigious and that he, as an educated man, was above everyone. He looked down on all of you who once helped him. All these years, every household expense, the raising and education of our 3 children, everything has been supported by me alone. His money, he always claimed, went to charity to help the poor. But in reality, it was spent on a woman and a child in the city. Now he's been sentenced for hooliganism. My children and I have been humiliated. And hasn't this dragged down the reputation of our whole village as well? A man like that, a husband like that, and a father like that, I don't want him anymore. The aunties exchanged looks for a few seconds. Then, after a brief moment of silent calculation and judgment, they all moved at once, standing firmly in front of me and shielding me behind them. Ha! A cheating man who's dragged the village's good name through the mud. Trash like that deserves nothing. If it were me, I wouldn't want him either. The village aunties shouted at Mrs. Chin. If you've got the guts, go to old Lee and make Thomas take responsibility. You think everyone in our village is easy to bully? How dare you come onto our land to stir up trouble? What old rules are you babbling about? You don't even follow the rules of being a decent human being. You only follow the rules of creating disaster. One sentence after another pushed Mrs. Chin back step by step. Jacob glanced at Tony. All the humiliation, anger, and the feeling of being betrayed by the father he once admired surged up at once. He suddenly stepped forward and shoved Tony far away. One old dad, one young dad. Who knows how many dads you actually have? And you still dare ask my mom to raise you? You really have no shame. Tony, still little and clueless, only rubbed his eyes and cried helplessly. Seeing more and more villagers gathering and the auntie's anger boiling hotter, Mrs. Chin's fingers trembled violently. She pointed at us and shouted, "All of you are abusing power and bullying others. Refusing to raise a child is a sin. Heaven will strike you down." Just then, under the heavy, humid weather, dark clouds massed above us. Without warning, thunder cracked across the sky. Everyone froze. Jacob pointed at Mrs. Chin and shouted, "You're the bad one. You're the one heaven should strike." Mrs. Chin's legs started shaking. Tony's crying grew louder with fear. I sneered. "If you want the Tang family to take responsibility, go kneel at the village entrance where the Tang ancestors' memorial tablet used to be. Maybe Thomas's parents are waiting to meet the wild grandson their son made outside." Just then, a dog somewhere began barking wildly. The tension reached its peak. Mrs. Chin spun around and ran, dragging Tony behind her. Both of them were terrified. One more second there, and the villagers really might have beaten them. Their dramatic scene actually gave me the perfect excuse to take my children to the city. Everyone in the village knew how I'd been harassed by the Chin family. And since my cousin Carl Grant was already established in the city, paperwork for relocation went smoothly. I also took the opportunity to change the children's names, giving them my last name. Jacob asked, "Mom, why do we have to change our names? Is it because bad people might come find us again?" I didn't answer directly. I simply smiled and said, "These new names just sound better." Thomas had named them Tonga, Tong Shirna Tonga, names full of the Tong family's ambitions. But the names I chose, Jacob Grant, Ethan Grant, Mia Grant, carried only what mattered to me. As long as they grew up healthy and happy, that was enough. Before leaving, the neighbor lady helped me gather some news. That wicked Mrs. Chin didn't want Tony dragging her down anymore. She actually drugged the boy, planning to abandon or secretly sell him. But midway, Tony woke up on her back and struggled violently. Mrs. Chin was using one of those cloth straps to carry him. And when Tony moved too much, both of them fell into a ravine. They weren't found for several days. The old woman died. Tony's legs were both broken. No one knew if he would ever walk again. Truly, sins committed by oneself cannot be survived. I had nothing to say about it, only a heavy sigh. Everyone has their own fate. After what happened to the Chin family, who knew whether they would harbor resentment and come looking for trouble again? My children were still young. I couldn't endure any more threats. The neighbor lady had thought such satisfying news would make me happy, but she didn't expect that the darker side of human nature worried me even more. All I could do was tell the children, "Once we get to the city, you must take good care of Mom, listen to what I say." Each of them nodded obediently. On the bus headed into Jincheng, Ethan suddenly asked, "Mom, once we get to the city, will we live good days again?" Looking at their hopeful faces, I said firmly, "From now on we'll all have good days." Life in the city truly changed everything. Jacob became a gifted painter. Ethan never had the talent for academics. So when he hit his teenage years, he went to help at Carl's restaurant. He started from the very bottom, doing whatever tasks needed doing. Then one year tragedy struck. Carl's 7-year-old son passed away in an accident. Carl and his wife were devastated. It was Carl who suggested fostering Ethan. I agreed. Without Carl and his wife, my divorce from Thomas would never have gone so smoothly, and my children and I would never have found our footing in the city back then. Because Ethan became Carl's foster son, the bond between our families grew even stronger. We cooperated in business, practically becoming one household. Carl's restaurant flourished, eventually registered as a brand, and then expanded into a company. Business kept growing larger. By then my youngest, Mia, who had the best grades of the three, was admitted into a university. We relocated together with the company to the south. More than 10 years passed. One day news exploded. One of Jacob's paintings sold for a sky-high price at an art auction in Harbor City. Reporters all fought to get the story. And as soon as fame arrived, so did people who smelled an opportunity. That day, the housekeeper let in an elderly repairman who had come to fix a clogged kitchen pipe. But when they walked through the living room, the old repairman froze and refused to move another step. "Lisa Grant," he said. I looked up. The man wore a work uniform. His skin was dark, dry, sunken. His face was so worn and filthy that it was nearly impossible to recognize him anymore. Only the hatred burning in those eyes made me realize. Standing in front of me was Thomas, the husband I hadn't seen in many years. Thomas looked me over, then let his eyes sweep across the luxurious villa interior. "Damn, you threw me in prison for years, and now you and the kids are all living it up. Do you even know what I went through? Hurry up and tell me. Did you steal the box of gold bars our Tang family saved back then?" There was no trace left of the aloof, pretentious intellectual he once claimed to be. He looked like nothing more than a beaten-down nobody twisted by bitterness. The housekeeper, Auntie Wong, stepped in front of me immediately and shouted, "Stop right there." But Thomas didn't listen. He lunged toward me, trying to hit me. In an instant, Auntie Wong struck him with a kick and flipped him to the ground, pinning him with a joint lock. He could only cry out in pain. Auntie Wong was no ordinary housekeeper. She was a retired gold medal boxer. Security arrived as well. I held on to the railing, steadying myself, and before Thomas was dragged out, my children arrived home. Coincidentally, or maybe fatefully, this was our weekly family dinner day. No matter how busy they were, they always came home to see me. That day it gave Thomas exactly what he had wanted. A chance to see all the children I had raised, each outstanding in their field, each thriving. Jacob, tall and confident, stepped to my side. Thomas's eyes lit up instantly. In our previous life, Jacob had been his favorite. Thomas had poured everything into him. Education, pressure, expectations, until Jacob entered a prestigious university and later became a high-ranking civil servant. Jacob had revived the Tang family name, becoming Thomas's greatest pride. But now Jacob didn't even look at him. He cared only about me. "Mom, what happened? Are you hurt? What's going on at home?" Thomas crawled forward desperately. Jacob, look at me. I'm your father. Jacob stepped forward, his expression icy cold, his stare so sharp it made Thomas's whole body jolt. Funny, I don't remember having any other dad. Before Thomas could argue, the front door opened again. Ethan walked in wearing a sharp suit, and Mia followed behind him in a neatly tailored professional outfit. Ethan snorted. Well, would you look at that? Someone shameless enough to force himself into other people's homes trying to be a dad. Take a good look at what real shamelessness looks like. Thomas's face twisted green with rage. The day you were born, I should have drowned you. Ethan spun around and slapped him hard across the face. Say that again, you bastard. Ethan had always been the child Thomas disliked most. Not because of anything he did, but because he didn't look like Thomas. Instead, Ethan had Carl's temper and sharpness. Nephew takes after the uncle, as people say. Normally, that wouldn't be a problem, but Thomas carried deep resentment toward Carl due to their difference in family background. He projected all that bitterness onto Ethan. Since Ethan was little, Thomas beat and scolded him, constantly causing him to drop out of school early, pushing him into society too young, and hardening him into someone who had to fight his way up. Father and son grew further and further apart. In our previous life, that family disaster over the little goldfish was largely caused by Thomas himself. He understood Ethan's temperament well. That's why before dying, he spoke privately with Jacob several times on purpose to make Ethan believe Jacob had stolen everything. The resentment between the brothers exploded. But in this life, the first one to slap reality into Thomas was Ethan. Mia adjusted her glasses and calmly reminded him. That's enough. If you keep hitting him and he ends up injured, it'll be troublesome to explain to the police. Dizzy from the slap, Thomas finally looked clearly at Mia. You, Mia, that's you? I'm your youngest daughter, she said coldly. And I haven't remembered who you are for a long time. As for what you did back then, I'm thoroughly disgusted. You are a suspect who intentionally came here to cause harm. And I am the attorney who can represent the state to prosecute you. Don't worry, every crime you deserve will be accounted for. Thomas's eyes widened. He never imagined that the daughter he dismissed in the past life, marrying her off carelessly when she got older, would become a decisive, formidable lawyer who could look him straight in the eye without fear. You all really don't remember me? I'm your father. Ethan scoffed first. You're unbelievable. If you're my dad, then what's my name? Thomas blurted. Xingye. You're Tang Xingye, Ethan snapped. My name is Ethan Grant. Ethan as in joyful, thriving. Ever heard of Grant Family Foods? One of the biggest restaurant groups in the country. The chairman, Carl Grant, used to be my uncle. Now he's my dad. And senior shareholder Lisa Grant is my mother. You know nothing, yet dare to show up trying to claim you're my father. The more I say it, the more I want to beat you again. Jacob held Ethan back and spoke calmly. Ethan is the CEO of Grant Family Foods now. And if he hadn't started working there in middle school, brewing tea, bussing tables, doing cashier work, managing accounts, there'd be no way the business would have grown enough to have branches all across the country. Thomas looked at his two sons, deeply moved. All these years with your father gone, you must have suffered. It's all her fault, Lisa. If it weren't for her, you wouldn't have turned your spears at me. Mia stepped forward, her voice icy. Are you adding defamation to your list of crimes? Thomas flinched. Mia continued. I'm a lawyer. Jacob is an artist. Ethan is an entrepreneur. Every success we've achieved comes from the sacrifices and support of our mother. Back then, our shameless excuse of a father ran off with all the family money and left our mom beaten unconscious for an entire day and night. That so-called dad never thought about us for even a single moment. He went to the city and used our family savings, and who knows what other dirty money to buy things for his mistress and her child. If mom hadn't woken up in time, none of us 3 kids might have even lived to adulthood. But after hearing her speak, Thomas suddenly roared at Mia like a mad dog. Lisa Grant, who gave you the right to stop Jacob from taking the civil service exam? Only becoming an official could revive the Tang family legacy. You ruined our Tang family. You ruined me, Thomas. After everything he'd heard, that was the point he chose to fixate on. He completely ignored everything his children said, only the Tang legacy. Jacob's gentle demeanor vanished in an instant. Are you insane? I heard everything back then in that garden. You were going to abandon us. You were already planning to run away with your mistress and illegitimate son, and confront the old principal together. Now you think you have the right to step into our lives, into our home." Thomas's face collapsed as if torn open. His beloved eldest son, the pride of his past life, had stripped him bare. In the previous life, he had enjoyed wealth all his days. In this life he had wandered, suffered, and lived like a beaten dog. The only thing that kept him going was the memory of those better years. But now, standing before him, all his children looked at him the way one would look at a criminal. He couldn't bear it. When the police took him away, his eyes never left Mia. She didn't say a single word. Everything she wanted to say, her children had already said for her. He wanted to know the truth. But she refused to let him know. In this life, not only had she sent him and Evelyn Tate to prison, but she had also drawn all three of her children back to her side, letting him witness with his own eyes their harmony, their affection, their success. Later, after the police left, her children stayed behind to discuss what they should do about Thomas in the future. Mia said, "He'll only be detained for a few days. Once he's released, I'm afraid he'll try to come bother Mom again." Ethan snorted. "Easy. I'll call a few brothers and take care of him." Jacob shook his head. "Don't be stupid. He's been in prison and living at the bottom for years. He won't give up that easily. I was offered a teaching position at Angwa University. If it comes to it, Mom can move there with me. No way he'd be able to find us." Mia smiled slightly. "No need for all that trouble. He's been acting like a mad dog for so many years. And yet, he still found us in this southern city, even after we changed our names. That means heaven sent him here to meet us one last time. So we shouldn't waste heaven's intention." The three children fell silent, exchanging looks and unspoken thoughts. I said plainly, "Back then, he abandoned everything to reunite with that woman and her son. So now why don't we send him right back to them?" It was Ethan who carried out the plan. When Thomas was released from the detention center, he happened to run into a recruitment truck. The job requirements were extremely lax. Having been in prison and being old and frail, he couldn't resist. He got on the van. One blink, one gag, one tie around the wrists and ankles. Thomas nearly died of fear. When they finally untied him and pushed him out of the vehicle, he realized he'd been dumped back in his hometown. He had returned here once after completing his prison sentence in the previous life, but the old house had long since collapsed. Most villagers had moved away. Only a few elders remembered him, and the younger people didn't recognize him at all. But the thing that truly broke him was this: the box of tiny goldfish hidden inside the chicken coop wall gone. Whether I had taken it or someone else had found it, he had no way to know. This time, as Thomas wandered back into the village, an elderly villager, one I had arranged long beforehand, pretended to recognize him with great enthusiasm. The old villager led Thomas all the way to an aging clay tile house. For half the walk, Thomas couldn't understand why he was being brought there until the door opened and he saw her. Inside the dim room stood Evelyn Tate's mother, her hair completely white. And beside her, leaning on a cane, was a twisted, crippled, middle-aged man, their son Tony. When the three of them laid eyes on each other, the world fell silent. Evelyn was the first to react. She lunged forward and grabbed Thomas with both hands, clutching him like a lifeline. "You damned bastard!" she screamed. "How many years have you been out of prison? Why are you only coming back now?" Thomas instinctively tried to pull away, but she gripped him even tighter. "I went to prison because of you. My whole family is dead." "Dead? Do you hear me? And our son Tony? Do you even have a conscience? How could you not come for us? How could you leave us like this?" As if Thomas didn't already know. Of course he knew. If he didn't, why would he wander around for years and never return home? First, because he suspected I had discovered the box of tiny goldfish, taken the money, and fled with the children. He couldn't accept that. Second, because he didn't dare face Evelyn and her son. He didn't want the responsibility. Meanwhile, Ethan had donated a school and a clinic to the village and opened a supply line for agricultural goods, genuinely improving the place. With so many villagers knowing the Grant family, Thomas had no chance of slipping away now. In our previous life, Evelyn had cried at the graveyard, saying she and Thomas could never be together. Well, this time they could be together for the rest of their long, miserable lives. Killing a man is easy. Letting reality grind him down slowly, that was what I wanted. Let the two families' children stand in stark contrast. Let Thomas's already shattered heart rot one crack at a time. He lost his conscience long ago, and learning ruthlessness from him wasn't that hard. After settling everything regarding Thomas, I woke up one morning and suddenly felt dizzy. Auntie Wong panicked and rushed me to the hospital. By noon, all three of my children had dropped everything and gathered around my hospital bed. "Mom, are you okay? Mom, how do you feel? Mom, what can I do? Tell me anything." Their voices echoed exactly like when I had just been reborn. Three tiny children surrounding my bed, begging me to wake up. Over these 30-plus years, I have lived fully and contentedly. I looked at my children and whispered, "Jacob, Mom was happy to let you chase your freedom. In the end, you chose the art you loved and became one of the country's most celebrated painters. Ethan, Mom always knew you were wild and free-spirited. The family business fell into your hands, and you carried two families' burdens all on your own. I'm proud of you. And Mia, Mom knew you wanted to prove yourself, to show everyone your brilliance, to make sure no one ever looked down on you just because you're a girl. And you did it. I'm happy for you." My three middle-aged children cried in front of me. Just then, Auntie Wong walked in holding my test report. "Mrs. Grant, it's just low blood sugar. A little problem older folks get. Why are you all crying? This woman here is perfectly fine." The three kids scrambled to grab the report. Ethan wiped his eyes. "Mom, you scared me to death. I thought you didn't want me anymore." Mia bent down and hugged me tightly. Jacob let out a shaky laugh. "Mom, if anything ever happened to you, no matter how successful I become, it would all be meaningless." I shook my head gently. "You're you. You're not anyone's shadow. You don't need to worry about me all the time. Angwa University recommended you for that position. Go. The world is vast. Go live it. Freedom of thought. Your talent fully realized. Jacob, you really did turn your life into poetry." Jacob suddenly crouched beside my hospital bed. "Mom, it doesn't matter what kind of poem life becomes. What matters is that you're here."